New polling from The Economist and YouGov paints a bleak picture for Donald Trump and his party just 71 days from the midterm elections. Nationally, the president has a net approval of minus 26, with just 35% of Americans approving of his presidency. When broken down by individual states, it gets worse. In all but 3 of the 50 states, Donald Trump has an approval rating in the negative. Numbers like those have Democrats nationwide comparing today's political environment to 20 years ago, 2006, when a deeply unpopular lame duck president contributed to a massive blue wave that saw Democrats win back both the House and the Senate. And what is Donald Trump doing as Americans nationwide continue to turn on his presidency? Things like this, waving a ceremonial green flag at an Indy car race in the streets of the nation's capital. Let's bring in Democratic strategist Dan Kennan in. He served as battleground director for the Harris-Walz campaign. Claire is still with us. Claire, 2006 was a big year for you. Your election win in Missouri helped flip the Senate for Democrats. What parallels do you see today compared to when you were on the ballot in 2006?
Well, there's a bunch of them. Jon Tester and Jim Webb and I all won our races in Virginia, Montana, and Missouri with less than 50% of the vote. We beat incumbent sitting senators in states that really we had no business winning, especially Montana and Missouri. But we had a war that was very unpopular, the Iraq War, and we had a whole lot of corruption. People forget the amount of corruption that was in the headlines in 2006. And so it feels very similar. We did not have the brutal economy that people are feeling right now. We didn't have people not to be able to afford to put gas in their car or hamburger in their spaghetti sauce. So that's even worse than what it was in 2006. But it does feel very similar. And competing in states today that a year ago no one thought we could compete in tells you all you need to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the Virginia, Montana, Missouri. It's a reminder, Dan, that we live in a period of time where the electorate is dynamic. These maps are dynamic. Candidate choice really matters here. The pathway is different. We're not talking about those states anymore. Yeah. We're talking about Alaska and Texas and Iowa. But I wonder what you think this is all going to hinge on.
Well, I'm struck by how similar those races are that Senator McCaskill had in her race in Missouri in 2006. That could be Iowa this time around. Jim Webb winning in Virginia could be North Carolina and Roy Cooper this time around. You mentioned Montana and Jon Tester. That could be Mary Peltola and Alaska. And, of course, Sherrod Brown in Ohio is once again Sherrod Brown in Ohio. So we might see a very similar kind of map that we saw in 2006. But, you know, I look back at 2004. Alicia, and a point that I often make to folks looking at the map the Democrats need to compete against is that Kamala Harris won something like 12 or 13 states by double digits, where Donald Trump carried 24 of them by double digits, which kind of projects to like a 48 seats in a layup for Republicans if you believe that map is eternal. But it's not eternal. You know, when you do things to the American people, when, as Tim said in the last segment, when the ag community, farmers and ranchers feel the pinch on these tariffs, when 22 million Americans see their healthcare premiums doubled or tripled, 3 million of them lose coverage, and then everybody else gets a 15% spike in healthcare. And by the way, that's another example of 2006 where healthcare premiums were really on the rise back then, fueling a bit of a backlash against Congress not prioritizing that issue back then. You can really blow apart your own constituency. And we've talked a lot about Latino voters, you know, in 2004, who largely moved toward Republicans on the basis of immigration and costs, only to have both those issues gaslit, you know, back at them under this administration. So I think the map is challenging from an historical perspective for Democrats, but Donald Trump Republicans and that deep unpopularity of the agenda and the approach are putting those races in play. And we have excellent candidates in Roy Cooper and Sherrod Brown and Mary Peltola and Tellerico and Josh Turek, who I think can carry the day in the fall.
Claire, a new congressional ballot poll that was put out by Emerson, it shows more than a 7-point gap between Democrats and Republicans. To just sort of go back to something we were talking about earlier, like at what point do Republicans in battleground districts get freed up to distance themselves and criticize this president, understanding that his unfavorability is a big part of what's dragging them down?
Well, you've seen a few Republican senators speak out, like you mentioned, and House members about this beef import and the impact it's going to have on America's ranchers. Interestingly enough, and I like to highlight this race because it's so close to home for me, the Kansas race, Roger Marshall has not retreated one bit. He's basically saying, oh, he's just great for agriculture. Trump's just great for agriculture. And Kansas is a huge beef state. And Adam Hamilton is such a strong candidate there and doing very, very well. Honestly, I never expected, I thought Tallarico would compete, but I honestly didn't expect us to be where we are in Iowa and Kansas. And you can put a lot of that at the feet of Trump's trade policies. The Iran war, yes, but his trade policies have really, really hurt the heartland. And I don't think he realizes it. I think he thinks people are just blindly loyal to him. And, I wanted to say in the last segment, Alicia, when she was commenting that he just tells Americans to feel a little pain and they'll get over it. You know what he really tells Americans? You don't really feel pain. Those polls aren't real. I'm winning the Iran war. Kansas is a bad guy. Canada is a bad guy. He plays make-believe with people. And you can tell people a lot of things that's not true, like an election was stolen. You can't tell them you're not feeling pain when they're feeling pain. That does not work. And that's why his polls are tanking.
Especially when one of the things we pull is like Americans asking, like, do you understand what my life is like? Do you feel my pain, Dan? That's one of the ways you assess whether or not a campaign is connecting. It also is so interesting to me, given that I live here on Earth One, Dan, that they keep trying to roll back the things that they know are unpopular, right? So you remember the big piece about how Stephen Miller was no longer going to be calling the shots on immigration, yet I see videos every day of moms and dads getting pulled off the streets of America and sent to detention centers, sometimes with or without their children. They could have taken the win when the tariffs were knocked out by the courts, but instead they've decided to continue to pursue these tariffs. Like, they're not doing the things you would normally do in order to get through a midterms, right? Instead, they're actually doubling down what they're doing with Iran, what they are doing with Canada. They can't seem to imagine either restraint or another way forward.
Boy, spot on, Alicia. And the they in this case is an increasingly small, insular, isolated group of people around the president. We knew this in 2024. Your network covered it extensively, and our campaign, rang the alarm bell as best we could. But we understood that the kind of folks around Trump in Trump 1, may have been conservatives and MAGA adjacent, if not fully MAGA, but they were often serious people like General Kelly or even like a Mick Mulvaney, coming from the Congress. But now you've got the My Pillow caucus around the president and this small group, including now Natalie Harp, just sort of giving him stuff that he wants to see. He could not be any more disconnected from what the American people are feeling, as you're pointing out. I also think, though, this extends not just to Trump and the administration, but to the Republicans often running for these seats, whether they're incumbents or not, in the Congress and in the Senate. They have believed in some cases that Trump is magic and Teflon because he came back and won in kind of a dramatic fashion. And there's something to be learned from that for sure. But he's clearly not Teflon. He's at 34% approval. He's below where George W. Bush was after Katrina at this point, so cratering earlier even than happened in that second term for Bush. And, I go back to Alaska. You've got a candidate like Mary Peltola, who is a real Alaskan, native Alaskan, born in Alaska, has lived in the villages, understand what it means to have $20 per gallon diesel in some of those remote villages in Alaska and healthcare access completely cut off. And Dan Sullivan, who is a guy, no offense to Ohio, born in Ohio, who is clearly more comfortable in a place like D.C. and talking like a politician. That thread kind of runs through a lot of these races. And I think beyond the White House itself, the candidates and the contrast will be really important in the fall.